Okay. Well, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the June 20th, 2023 meeting of the Litchfield Planning Board. Would you all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. We'll start with the roll call of members. Michael Croto, Chair.
Kate Stevens, Vice Chair.
Kimberly Queenan, Selectmen's Rep.
Sam Terrell, Member. Jeremy Robitaille, Member.
Okay, good evening, everybody. And we have with us this evening Jay Mankara, our circuit rider from NRPC. Welcome. I'm going to start out with public input on non-agenda items not on the agenda for this evening. Is anybody here wish to comment on any public or have any public input on non-agenda items not on the agenda? Why don't you come forward? You can have a seat at the table and introduce yourselves to the board.
For the record, my name is Jerry Sorensen. I'm at 38 Lock Mill Drive, Litchfield. I'm a registered architect, and I'm a member of the Litchfield Veterans Group.
I'm Bobby Jacques, 18 Lock Mill Drive. I'm the president of Litchfield Veterans Group.
Welcome.
So we have a presentation here. So you probably know, I mean, you may or may not have heard of the Litchfield Veterans. We've been in a group for actually 4 years, but I'm sure you've seen the 115 flags on the street. I'm sure you've seen the flags at both cemeteries that, and of course, if you talk to any of the middle school or GMS teachers, they know us now after we provided a nice lunch, end of year lunch for them. So along with that, we started out where we want to do some different projects. So we're now at a point where we think we've had a couple successful golf tournaments at Passaconaway. And again, without using any of the town's funds, we are proposing what we refer to as a proposal for Veterans Park, which is the lot just across the street from Town Hall here. Yep, it's up on the screen there. So at this point, we're presenting it as a concept. Obviously, that is town land. We don't own the land, but what we're providing is information of what we would like to do to donate to the town as part of this. So what we're looking at is the first, well, I'll refer to as the first phase of the park, which is called the entrance of the park. Obviously, we have funds, but we'll continue on. There's ideas with multiple phases how the whole site will be developed. But this first piece is what we refer to as the park entrance. You can see on the map on here, and I do have larger copies to distribute. If you want to distribute those. So the idea was, we were looking at Veterans Park. There's a couple ways. You see there's lots of towns in the area that discuss or have the different parks. A lot of them are based on the different campaigns, World War I, World War II. Our concept is more developed to emphasize the actual branches of the service, the Department of Defense. So you'll notice that our ideas are celebrating the Air Force, the Army, the Marines, and at that point, giving opportunity for those. I think the number is near 400 veterans that currently live in Litchfield, the opportunity to not only enjoy the park, but to the esprit de corps of their particular service branch. So the first is just kind of an overall site map. You can kind of see where it's placed. Most of the information I'll try to cover as quickly as possible is on the second page. What we wanted to do was make sure we developed a park that was about as maintenance-free as possible. So although it is more expensive, rather than putting a standard pavilion up, wooden pavilion, we opted for the metal, steel construction with metal roofing. Our main concern there is to make sure that it maintains its effort, because, I mean, its look, because this is what we're referring to. It's a gathering space, but we believe it to be the entrance of that area there. So if you look at the site plan on the second page, you'll see what we've tried to do is And we'll adjust this. You know, this is just the initial concepts. We'll obviously we'll work with Jeff, the building inspector, and make sure we got all the setbacks and everything properly documented. But we're trying to push into that flat area. One of our biggest, I call it design criteria, is accessibility. Now, we know accessibility is important in everywhere, but we do know that it's very important when you're talking about veterans from the, you know, quite a few veterans are in wheelchairs, quite a few veterans are walkers, canes, and even without, so we wanted to make sure we kept it flat at this sort of entrance piece. So you'll notice that we even we're going to develop even the side, that entrance on the road. We're going to put the paths in there so there's walkable paths, we're not walking. And then along that front entrance, we're proposing a depressed curb, so it would actually just be entrance right on into the site. So when you come up here, the first thing you see is, if you look to your upper right on that second sheet, that's the Veterans Park, that's the main sign, that's a concept. We're still working through that. The idea is that that entrance sign will be kind of the gateway, the entrance, and then you're right behind it is then you'll have the actual the covered structure. You'll notice that behind the structure, it goes out, it's pretty much open. That's where the whole thing is, that becomes the entrance through, and then we'll start developing different ideas as they come. Like one of the was we talked about, you know, different we're not doing the campaigns, but we do, like, there would be a memorial walk or different. We're looking at trying to maintain the nature of that site, but give the community a place to meet in a covered area. We've seen quite a few activities that have gone in that area. It's kind of moved down to Dara Pond now, and some of the, you know, like the Christmas tree lighting moved down there. So we're looking at the ability to actually provide something that would have this area again be usable. So along that, you'll see that there's 6 on each side. So the actual underneath the pavilion would be concrete, and then what we're looking in is to a pervious asphalt. So as we're looking at the drainage in different areas, we know that when we add that much pavement, so to speak, we are going to be working with some site contours and stuff, developing some retention and stuff on there to make sure we meet all code requirements. We'll definitely meet all code requirements. So along there, you'll see there's sort of 6. There's 3 on each side. They call them the service memorials. If you look at the lower left part of the second page, that's an actual memorial kind of setup. The idea is that that's granite. And then eventually, as veterans of Litchfield, we would have them, their names would be etched in that. We'd maintain sort of I don't want to say roll call, I'm looking for a better phrase, but more of a remembrance of those that served in those particular branches. Along with that, what you see, it's kind of dotted in there, would be granite benches, 1 for each service. And then what we found is, obviously, these become areas of reflectance, of remembrance, and many veterans, or many folks, if they're not just veterans, need a place want to sit down as well if they want to spend time there.
Can I just say something?
Yep.
They'll be 6 foot wide with a backing in the back, and the etched of each logo of each service will be in each one of them separately. So Army, Air Force, Navy, Marines, Coast Guard, and the Space Force. So it's a room for 2 or 3 people could sit on that thing. And they'll all be constructed in one piece. So when they come in from the vendor, they'll put them in the ground. So it's not going to be like there's a front piece and a back piece. It's all be constructed together.
So that's great. So again, our initial concept is to develop the entrance to Veterans Park. At this point, like I said, what you have before you is concept drawings. As we're working through this, the approval process, we'll obviously provide the engineer to the detailed drawings that are required, and we'll coordinate those through Mr. Blackwell, of course, making sure that we've met all requirements of the zoning for Litchfield.
So, just as a point of order, I imagine that the board that's going to approve this would be the Board of Selectmen, because they have the authority, because this is town land. Certainly, the planning board can hear from the applicant in terms of, once if they bring an official site plan before us, and we can recommend to the board, but it really is going to have to be a decision that's made by the Board of Selectmen. I think it's a wonderful project, but I think that's where,
Yeah,
Public hearing.
and you're gonna have a public hearing. on it.
Yeah, I think we're meeting with, I think what in initial talking with selectmen, what they wanted us to do was to sort of pre-coordinate with the plan, to make sure that, and kind of get your temperature on it, so if they had questions, they could ask back to you before, while they were making their decision.
Okay. Any ideas when you'll have an official site plan ready, at some point, or? Because this is really a conceptual, so it's not necessarily an actual site plan. And being this is public input on non-agenda items, it's not really on the agenda for tonight. But certainly, if you want to, present a site plan at some point to the planning board, you're welcome to do that. And certainly, obviously you're going to be meeting with the Board of, have you already met with the Board of Selectmen?
We did that initially.
Okay.
And we're going back on Tuesday
Okay,
next week.
so at least you can, communicate with them and.
Yeah, I think, just so, what our process thinking is that we would introduce the project to the planning board.
Sure.
Then we go to the Board of Selectmen. At that point, the fact that it's Veterans Park, we understand there would be some sort of community, there has to be some sort of community,
That's already on the agenda, is that right, Kim?
Yep. Yep.
For the people input, whether they, because they call it Veterans Park, that's already been put on the agenda.
So I think at that point, we make those last couple hurdles, and then at that point, then we would feel very comfortable in making the investment into the engineering drawings and stuff like that. So there's only one way to do it the right way. And I always tell people, it never costs too much to do it right. It only costs too much to do it twice. So.
Okay, very good. Well, if you certainly, at some point, if you can get onto the agenda for the planning board, I will welcome you to come back, and we can certainly have more discussion about this. And you'll be meeting with the Board of Selectmen, so we can sort of, figure out, what everyone's thinking. And obviously, there'll be a public hearing and that
Right.
stuff, so.
I think at that point, once we've crossed those hurdles, then we'll go full blown on the.
I mean, I certainly think this is a wonderful, wonderful thing you're doing. I think it's a great project, and I wish you the best success with it. And, hopefully that you get approval from the Board of Selectmen. But thank you very much for coming in tonight, John.
Thank you for
and
letting
presenting
us
this.
present.
And we do appreciate your hard work and effort. So.
Play golf with us next year, that's all.
Okay, I will.
Thank you.
And it's free for everybody in the whole town, not for veterans. We're gonna give it to the town, so if we can go ahead and move forward and get this done this year, we'll have a ribbon cutting and then
Very nice.
the ceremonial key.
Well, I didn't want to say it out loud because that puts pressure, but our goal is Veterans Day would be
Yeah, November 10th, we wanna do it before if you guys are off on the 11th, so we wanna do that on the day before.
That's our goal.
Okay,
We're working hard to get there.
all right.
Good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. The first item on the agenda for this evening is public hearing for proposed impact fee schedule. Jay, I guess we'll turn it over to you.
Right, I'm gonna pass around a handout. I'm gonna speak to, I think that's one for everybody. So you guys already have it, and you're in the audience. So we've seen this before, but I figure I will run through it. Just a little bit of background. So some time ago, we were asked by the town to do an update of the town's impact fee study. The last time that was done was 2014. And so we've done that. I think we had talked about it previously, but what I'm going to do is just kind of run through what was done, talk about the assumptions, and what's changed. And then this is a public hearing, so obviously it's open to public input. And then just in terms of next steps, if the board wishes, then the board could make a recommendation, the planning board could make a recommendation to the Board of Selectmen, who would then act on whether or not to adopt an updated fee schedule. So that's kind of the process. So just running through what has been done to date. So first of all, obviously, we reviewed the 2014 study, which was very in-depth. Needless to say, a lot of the assumptions that went into that, just given the passage of time, are no longer valid. So we had to take a look at what would make sense. So backing up just a little bit, just in terms of what impact fees are. An impact fee is a fee that the town can assess. It's assessed by the planning board at the time a project is approved. And the concept is that you are assessing a fee on development to help offset the cost of capital facilities that are necessitated because of that development. So in other words, the growth caused by that, from that development has triggered the need for an additional investment in capital facilities. And those facilities also have to benefit that development. So the development has triggered the need for the facility, and the facility in turn has to provide some benefit. Under our ordinance, that a capital facility has to be at least $10,000 in value and have a useful life of at least 5 years. And critically, if the town does not expend those funds within more than 6 years, or commit those funds, then those funds have to be returned. So just kind of important things to think about in terms of how that frames what we're looking at. So our task was really to start by looking at what are the capital facilities that are currently planned in the town, and then looking at those facilities and determining to what extent do they include capacity for future growth, or are based in somehow on a response to future growth. So that was kind of the trigger point. Some of these were easier than other ones, so I'm just going to start with where we started. So if you're looking at the handout, kind of towards the upper left, so the first one is schools. Currently, the school impact fees were based on some improvements made to at the middle school, but primarily Campbell High School, paying off the debt for Campbell High School, which has been paid. Needless to say, it's been paid, so we're not going to charge impact fees for that at this point. The capital expenditure that we identified that, and again, there could be more, but that we identified that was in the CIP, and there is a direct link to the CIP, I should add. You have to have a CIP in order to have impact fees, and the impact fee ordinance directly references the CIP. So the CIP is key because that is actually something officially adopted by the town that says these are facilities we plan. So in the existing CIP is a plan to build a new Griffin Memorial School. And in that plan, when you look at the study for that plan, there is additional capacity that is built into the core facilities of the school to accommodate future growth. So that's a pretty clear link between a proposed capital facility, for which we do have a cost, and future growth. So what we did in that scenario was take the estimated costs of the proportion of those core facilities that is intended to accommodate future growth, and use that as the basis for calculating the impact fee. And the way that was basically done was we have generation rates for the number of students that are estimated to be generated in those elementary grades, based, linked to development type. And so that was kind of the basis of the cost. What's that? You can break that out as a per student cost, and then you can assign that to different units. So that was how we came up with the cost. In the existing impact fee schedule, we look at single-family detached homes, townhomes, two-family structure, and some of these we really don't vary too much. But essentially, we do that on a per square foot basis. We found that we really didn't have the data to support that breakdown. We had generation rates for multifamily housing, and we had generation rates for single-family housing. We didn't have that kind of gradation of what's a garden-style unit, what's a townhouse unit. So that data wasn't available. So what we proposed instead was simply doing it by dwelling unit, not square feet. Once again, there's no generation rate per square feet that we were aware of, at least. So we broke it down by dwelling unit, and we primarily looked at really just two housing types. And that's single-family detached, which is by far the largest number of housing units in town, and all other housing types, so that includes multifamily as well as manufactured housing. So we did that by dwelling unit, and then you can see in the schedule what is proposed: $4,644 per single-family detached home, $2,167 per dwelling unit for all other types of housing. And I'll talk a little bit about, I'll talk about it now. So below, what you can see is the 2015 schedule, and which was the last time we adopted a schedule. And what we basically did was translate the per square foot assumption previously into a comparable, so that we could say what is the difference. So generally, for a single-family detached home, you're looking at an increase of just over $300 per unit. And for all other dwelling units, actually a slight decrease. It's almost the same, but it's a very slight decrease. So there isn't a huge amount of change between what we would propose as an impact fee versus what we're currently charging. Next is police. Police was relatively straightforward as well. I should just add, for schools, we charge, not surprisingly, impact fees are charged for residential development. They're not charged for non-residential development, under the obvious theory that non-residential development isn't generating school kids. So going down to police, in the case of police facilities, those are charged both for residential and non-residential development. So a similar type of analysis in a sense. What we did in this case was, once again, go to the CIP, and in the CIP there is a proposal to build a new police station. So obviously a capital facility that qualifies, it's in the CIP. We then looked at the standards, the space needs standards that are in the master plan that are based on a per capita basis. We looked at what's proposed for the police station and what's necessary to accommodate the existing population. The difference between that is the capacity that would be available to accommodate future growth. So we took the cost of that percentage of the building designed to accommodate future growth, and then once again said that is the cost that would be apportioned for impact fees. And so once again, we did that based on dwelling unit, since that seemed to be the most logical way to do it. And once again, we looked at the two types. In this case, we saw had no data to suggest that there is a difference in demand for police services between a multifamily unit and a single-family unit. There could be, but we have no data that supports that. So we simply said all dwelling units would be the same. Then we looked at non-residential uses, and kind of once again looked at how can we apportion the demand for police services amongst the different types of commercial, or I should say non-residential uses. Kind of once again, it was really difficult to find data that would pin that down. There are response calls, what is residential, what isn't residential, and what's industrial versus retail versus institutional. That's an analysis that probably could be done. We didn't have the data to do that. So what we did instead was, as a proxy, we looked at the percentage of the assessed valuation of town that would fall into these different use categories and use that as a proxy for demand. The result of that is that, and again, I'll do the comparisons in a moment, but you can see by far most of the demand is going to come from residential development, and that's because by far that's the dominant land use in town. So that was the assumption. So you can kind of see across the board, $943 per dwelling unit for residential development, $146 across the board for the different types of commercial, and those were all really very similar. Looking down below, you can see how that compares. So for the most part, for industrial development, for institutional development, there's really very, very little change. The biggest impacts are going to be for commercial and, I should say, office and commercial services. Mainly that's office type uses, office and research. Those go down significantly. There's very little of that in town. In fact, I think our most significant research facility is closed and will become something else. And you will also see a significant change for retail. That also went down significantly as well, using that assumption. End of the day, you could say arguably there's a burden shift from commercial development onto residential development using this methodology. In practice, so I mean, when you look at the proposed $943 per dwelling unit, that is significantly more than what we're currently charging, which is the $323. Presumably, when they did the last impact fee study, there was no police station proposed. So that's going to be really your significant difference. Moving on down to fire. Fire was also relatively straightforward. We have a expanded fire station now. We did a very similar analysis to say what percentage of the cost of the fire station can be attributed to new growth. In other words, what's the capacity to accommodate future growth? We know what the cost is because we're still paying off on the bond. And that is a legitimate cost. You can use impact fees to cover costs that you are already incurring, debt that you're already incurring, where there's that intent to cover future growth. So it was a very, very similar analysis. And what you can see is, again, we held all the same assumptions across the board. The impact is, $933, very similar to the police station per residential, for residential uses of both kinds, and $145 for all other non-residential uses. And then once again, you can look down to the blue below and see how that compares. That is an increase for residential development. It's not a giant increase. It's about $50 per unit. And then it is a decrease across the board for non-residential development, most particularly retail. That's where you see the biggest impact. So those were the three facilities that we felt comfortable making a recommendation on changes to the existing impact fee schedule. And once again, the reason we did so was because we had specific facilities that were proposed that had a component of them that was intended to accommodate future growth. When we looked at town office, library, and recreation, we couldn't identify anything in the CIP or aware of anything that is proposed that is intended to accommodate new growth. Again, can't say that doesn't exist. There was just nothing that we could pinpoint. The same thing was true for the road impact fee schedule. The road impact fee schedule, once again, we're not aware of any proposed road improvements that we could use as a basis for coming up with the new calculation. The only road improvement that we were aware of is the intersection of Corning Road, and that's going to be 100% state funded, so there's no town contribution to that. There's other things, of course, we could contemplate that we haven't, but we could look at impact fees for other facilities that we're not currently charging. Sidewalks, as I know, something that's been talked about. but those aren't currently in the impact fee schedule. So there's certainly other things we could look at. They haven't been looked at historically. Doesn't mean they couldn't be in the future. So that's led us to this conclusion. So we didn't make any recommendations for changes to anything other than school, police, and fire. And again, those are the reasons. So happy to entertain any questions.
Okay, any questions?
I just need a clarification. I know we discussed it before, but I'm sorry if I forgot the answer.
Sure.
The recreational facilities is $1,054, which is fine. I just want to understand why it's higher than police and fire, almost the same. And I know there was a reason, but I just want to understand that again.
I don't know the reason. There may have been a reason when the study was done initially. But as I noted, we're not aware of any recreation improvements that are currently proposed that are intended to accommodate new growth that we could use as a basis for coming up with a calculation.
Again,
Yeah, so you're right, it is high.
I'm not attacking recreation, I just want to understand it. So
Right.
when a new family moves into town, $1,000, a little over for a new home,
Yeah.
roughly. $300 and something for police, $800 for the fire department.
Right.
So again, I'm not attacking, I just want to understand, because you said that the algorithm, what we're doing is agreeing on what qualifies for an impact fee. It would be the new people moving into town for something that was growing in the future, right? What they perceived would trigger this, right? I just want to understand
Yes.
what $1,000 per family is paying for, so we can have recreation chime in, you know. I don't want
Right.
to get any feathers ruffled here. So, I know Talon Hall might have been something in the past, if they discussed something like that, but
Yeah, we looked at Talon Hall, and Talon Hall is in the CIP, but it's in the CIP as a replacement, not as a facility designed to accommodate new growth. So we couldn't use that as the basis for coming up with a fee. If a new and larger Talon Hall were proposed that was intended to accommodate, growth, to have a larger, say, capacity, then we could look at the delta. We could look at that additional capacity that was planned in that facility, and we could use that as a basis.
so if I'm a new person coming into town and I get this bill, I'm gonna say, what does my $1,000 go for rec? What is it, 300 for police? You know, they're gonna make a
You could.
question. They're gonna ask a question.
Right.
So I wanna have an
That
answer.
could happen.
I wanna have an answer, right? So it is popular in town. I'm not knocking recreation. It's the biggest impact fee, and it's almost the combined of the fire and the police, so I just
Well,
want to understand
right.
the logic behind it, that's all.
And it comes back to the point of if you don't expend the funds within 6 years, you have to return the funds.
That's good check and balance, but still, they're gonna ask the question.
Oh, of course.
Yep. Okay.
Or they're not gonna realize they paid it in the first place when they buy the house.
Yeah.
If the fees are returned, does that go back to the developer or the homeowner?
I believe the answer is it goes back to who paid it. So the homeowner may not really ever know. But
Okay.
I don't, I think I would probably defer to Kim, who might know better than I. But I believe it's whoever paid the fee is who gets it back.
I'd just like to make a clerical change. You have in the units for the non-residential, a lot of the units are per 1,000 square foot GFA, and then you have, the other one is per square foot GFA. I think we should just keep that all consistent,
You're right.
1,000 foot.
And then I have, the previous draft impact fee schedule, it was across the board per dwelling unit. Now, under residential, we have town office, library, rec, facilities per square foot living. Is there a reason why that was changed between these two? It looks like the totals are the same.
We didn't propose changing the impact fees for town office, library, and recreation.
Okay, so you just didn't want to change the units.
So we
They
didn't
originally-
change them to right now they're on a square foot basis, so we didn't propose changing it at all.
Okay, that makes sense.
Certainly could be done, but we didn't propose it.
Go ahead, Kim.
Just a general question. If I go on to the town website under planning board, they have a section for SIP. It's actually have a section for impact fees there.
Yeah.
And it looks like the last was adopted 2015, I think, fine. So, I just want general questions. So when you did your research, you came up with the 21-page document, which we've read, and it looks good. Did you look at these prior ones just to do as a cross-reference?
Yeah.
Because I just want to make sure, I know we're replacing Mr. Mayberry, who's retiring, his 30-year plan. The state still uses that plan, and it's a big 99-page job. So when I look at your 21 pages, I just want to make sure, I think we need somebody just to look to cross-reference. I haven't had time to do that. So these two bullets that are here, I see the old spreadsheet when I click on it.
Right.
And I'm sure you looked at that. If I just look at the first one was for the town roads, and the other one was public safety, municipal recreation. So you looked at all of that?
Yes.
And put that in there. So I think what I'm seeing between the SIP committee and here, I think we just need a way that we make sure that the Mayberry, the J, it's gonna be called that, and whatever we had, I want to make sure we cross-checked. Now, things change, I understand that, but at least we didn't leave anything off. And maybe we introduce something new, that's good, number one. And I also want to make sure, when somebody comes, like a lawyer, because they do come to us all the time, that we can say exactly, like, you're giving us methodology here, that's good, but also what qualifies, because that seems to be, between SIP conversations and, I can't speak for budget, but board, what actually would qualify for an impact fee? Because personal opinion we don't want, but we want something we can point to in writing that says what qualifies. I don't think yours does that. But right now, if somebody will come up to us and say, does this qualify for an impact fee? And half the group will say yes and half will say no. That's the issue that we're having. Not that you were tasked with that, but,
So I
that's why I
guess-
say, is it in the Mayberry stuff? I don't know.
I can safely say that with the analysis that we did, if it is going towards the police station, it's going to pay for the bond for the fire station, or it's going
Fire
to
station?
pay for a new elementary school, then you would be absolutely on firm ground.
I agree, but I'm getting other things that I'm hearing.
But when it comes to the categories where we couldn't make a recommendation to change anything, then that becomes more challenging because there is a lack of specificity in the prior study to identify the specific improvements that were covered.
We had a subset of what the Mayberry did. You did a little research, Kim Kleiner, our town admin. I think on just page 3, wasn't there a matrix of what was covered by impact fees and what wasn't? Not all towns did everything, which might be why we had a smaller.
Oh, yeah. I mean,
subset of
there's
it.
a range of things that you can charge impact fees for. The question is what can you use the funds that you've already collected for specifically?
I'm okay with that. It's like when somebody asks something brand new. And then
for-
they say,
yeah.
oh, can they, I don't want to pick on recreation, I'm not picking on them. If recreation comes to us and says, hey, we can use them, and we say, yeah. Or we say, no, and that's not just recreation. Anybody. We had library,
Right.
right? We've had school. So is there just some wording where we can say it qualifies yes or it qualifies no? Or do we have to make that up
Well,
ourselves?
there isn't necessarily an easy answer to that with the study that you already, that you currently have. For one thing, it's out of date. So you're looking at, the information that went into that is 9 years old, at least. So that's a challenge, but it's more challenging to figure out what some of those specific facilities are in some of those categories in the existing study. So it's not as easy to be able, there's not like a easy list that you can go down and say, this is in, this is out.
So, okay, so when I read your definition here, I think if I copied it right, development that triggers the need for capital facilities, it has to be $10,000 or more and a 5-year value. That's the new money that we'll be collecting. But then I guess I'm asking, what do we do with the money we already collected, right?
It's also true for the money you already collected because that's in the ordinance. So
So-
in order to expend impact fee funds on something, it has to be a capital facility, and that means it has to be $10,000 or more in value and has to have a useful life of more than 5 years. So that's already true for all the funds that you've already collected.
So this is carrying over. So this is carried over. What you read today about what this does, what you just said, is already in the.
It's in your ordinance.
Perfect. Okay, good. I just want to make sure. That's what I mean. I need to see that. 21 pages versus 99, I go.
Yeah?
I want to make sure we didn't miss anything.
I appreciated in this analysis because we didn't ask you to do a full study. We just asked you to update
Yeah.
the impact fees. So it still leans very heavily on the 2014 analysis. The numbers are out of date, population, costs, things like that. But is the methodology?
The methodology isn't necessarily the same, but what's in that what was adopted in 2015 is still what would stand behind all of your other impact fees, with the exception of the update to school, police, and fire. So that's what we identified as wanting to be updated. This 21-page study does not supplant what was done in 2015. It doesn't replace it.
Right, it builds on.
builds
top
on
of
it.
Right? It updates like
And it
how much
updates-
something cost and
Yes.
the projections
Yes.
and more recent. Because even in this 2014 study, it says multiple times, this is the study, but these fees should be updated regularly to account for things like, the police station plans changing over time.
And I think that
This does that.
the CIP is designed basically to be a living, breathing document, so that's sort of guides you to basically
Exactly.
build upon what has already been done. So
That's right.
That's my understanding.
I mean, we still got to make sure it's, I agree impact fees standalone are okay for the future. I still think a lawyer's going to say point to something. And I think we need that. I don't think you were tasked with that, but we can't just replace Mr. Mayberry's either, right? Is that true? The one that the state is using today, Kim? I don't think it can, so.
You're not replacing it.
I don't either. I just, so the standalone impact fee is fine.
Your 2014 is your basis,
Okay,
and this is updating, and we will have to go back and reflect on the
Mhm.
original documentation of the 2014.
right,
But what's suggested in this study is just an update to police, fire, and schools.
okay. I'm all right with that. I'm seeing the correlation between the groups, and I'm seeing what we're being asked, and getting a clear answer is difficult. So collecting the money is good. Using the money what it's for is good. I still think we have an
There
area
will still be a
missing.
judgment call required in looking at some of those
Yes.
proposals.
Yes. So we'll bring that back to the board. All right.
But I think what's clear is that anything that necessitates growth is going to be specifically related or trigger an impact fee happening. So I think that is basically a good starting point to identify what is going to be an impact fee and what is not going to be an impact fee. So I think that's important to focus on. Anybody have anything else that they want to add? Okay. So this is a public hearing tonight on this. So at this time, unless you're all done, Jay, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I will open it up to public input. And does any members of the public have any input, comments? I know I see Kim Kleiner, our town administrator. I know you had provided some information from town council. I don't know if you want to speak to that. I did see the email. I think everybody received a copy of it. Anything you want to add to that, or?
Kleiner, Town Administrator.
Good evening.
So I think that the information, the discussion with legal counsel the other day was very helpful, at least for me. I'm not sure if that answered any questions, but myself being new to the study, it really gave me more of a reflection of where it stands. Some of the questions around process and approval were clearly answered. So the town has to have a CIP plan in order to institute the impact fees. The CIP plan is not officially adopted in any way by vote or any way by the Board of Selectmen. It is given to the Board of Selectmen, and they may use it as they deem necessary in their budget processes. But it's deeply used in the formation of the impact fees. So I think everything that Mr. Minkara went through today clearly illustrated to me that we're following the methodology, and we are only attributing increase in costs to increased growth that we see, whether it's for police, schools. And I did go back after speaking with town council and reread the update, and could clearly follow the methodology that's being used to calculate just the growth of the projects. I did let you know that we are working to update the cost of the police facility. So we've contacted, there was actually 2 developers that had been used during the initial process, and we've contacted them and are having meetings, but we don't expect to have a cost to you until the CIP this year, coming year in July, when that's due. It's gonna take some work by the developers to come up with an increased cost due to time and materials. The other thing I think that was new to me, at least, to think of is, and I think this goes back to some of using the 2014 study, is if the 2014 study already said that we were deficient in certain areas, it also suggested we used non-impact fees for the building of those types of facilities, to bring yourself to a level where you're sufficiently providing for the population as of 2014. So I think we have a clearer understanding for the selectmen, and I do think I agree that this has been a difficult thing to figure out. And there's quite a bit of documentation that Mr. Mayberry has left behind that we have found now to help us in that process. So hopefully I'm at least feeling a lot more secure.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Anybody else for public comment this evening? Oh, this is a public hearing, so. Okay. We'll keep the public hearing open. Does the board have any other questions, or what would the board like to do? Do you want to? Yeah.
I would like just clarification from somebody from Recreation to explain why that's high. And maybe there's a reason, but I think, how big, $7,000 bill, $1,000? Like I said, if it's the same price as fire and police, they're gonna ask, and I just wanna understand what it is. So if we could just have.
So you're talking about this $1,054?
$1,054 per home, and again, I just wanna understand why it's there.
That was back in 2015?
Yeah, it looks like we inherited it, which is fine.
Yeah.
I just wanna understand it.
Okay,
That's all.
okay. Anybody have the objection to that, or? Okay.
So I guess what I was just thinking is, that we would update that, because I'd like to see this updated with every capital improvement plan update, which we're expecting in the fall. So, that's another opportunity to update the rec facilities, each of these, the town office, library, and recreational facilities fees, because I agree with you that if we can't figure out where that came from, and there's nothing on the capital improvement plan now, then what should we be charging for that? But I guess I just don't see an issue with changing it in pieces. Because we know for a fact that these need to be updated.
Mm-hmm.
And it would take quite a long time for rec to come up with they're following the capital improvement process. So now to ask them to basically do that sooner than the capital improvement committee's schedule, I don't know if it's worth their time, I guess, if we're going to update these again with the capital improvement plan.
So are you looking to basically, we're only looking at school, police, and fire, and putting these others sort of do more work on that, or?
I
is
mean,
that-
that's sort of what I've
is that
said
what you're
throughout
thinking of doing?
throughout
The other ones exist
Right.
already, so
Right.
if there would be a recommendation, it'd be a recommendation to update school, police, and fire.
It's
Specifically.
only those, right?
Right.
And these ones were just, you're right, we don't have enough information to update those, so we're not going to update those.
Okay, so that would be for another time, I guess, or
Right,
you
yeah,
wanna
because
do more research on it? What are
we
you?
are behind the like we should
Okay.
should be updating these
Okay,
annually, I think is what the report says.
Yeah, I mean, that is the other part of it. We should be looking at these annually, and I think once the CIP is done is absolutely the opportune time to do that. Once the CIP is updated.
So we're not, right, yeah, so I don't know that we're asking to change anything on the other ones.
So the department heads have to be into the SIP by July, right? The first draft, is it July? That's
July.
next month, that's 10 days.
it's coming up,
I
yes.
hope they're prepared. Did you hear anything from Recreation? Oh, sorry.
Just a quick question.
Yeah.
I hear this going back and forth.
Yeah.
In general, has any of those funds been returned?
I defer to Kim.
Because if we're not using them, then they would have to have been returned.
Right.
And you just know how that's working out or not working out with regards to recreation.
So I would have to go back and look, but yes, all funds that have not been used, the payee has been contacted, and they are being returned right up to this current year. I'm not sure if there was a large number of fees specific for recreation that were returned. There were other fees, but I can get the board that information. Perhaps you'd like a breakdown of fees that were returned per group, per type.
If that, makes it easier, if you can do that, that would be fine, thank you. Yeah,
So we're saying that if we move a piece of this forward,
right.
would leave recreation behind for the moment. It's still collecting something, right?
So we're,
Library.
so we're
What-
basically
what-
looking
which
at
ones?
school, police, and fire.
All right, what about the town office? How's that looking? Are we gonna wait till the
Those,
SIP?
I think, we're talking about sort of
Wanna hold on those?
putting a hold on,
They're not too high, All right,
along with the recreation.
I'm okay with that, but
Okay.
that's my opinion. We have to look there, but
I mean,
they
it's
could
up to the
justify
board.
it.
I mean, certainly,
Yeah.
is anybody else?
I agree with taking Jay's updates and then revisiting all the other town stuff, schools, recreation stuff and so on.
When would we do that, though? we'd have to, I don't wanna let it late 5 years, you know,
No,
I think,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
after the SIP, yeah.
Personally, I'd like to see the SIP, like last year had come to us with their recommendations. I'd like to see that every year trigger a look at the impact fees.
Be a good process. Yeah.
It should work that way.
Right?
It should work that way, and that's what we're trying to fix, because it wasn't, yeah. That's what we're trying to do, right the ship now, because it's been neglected. Now, we're trying not to conflict with warrant articles and budget again. That's why we're aggressive with the SIP, right? July, August, get it done.
right, we have to keep it,
So, again, the question is, could you wait the 2 months or not? You know, again, it's just they can probably justify it, but I just want to hear it, you know.
no, I think that's fair.
So, I'm okay with a partial, if you want to wait 2 or 3 months till it's done.
So with respect to school, police, and fire, do we want to take a vote on that? And
And just to clarify, the vote would be to recommend to the Board of Selectmen that they update the fee schedule for police, fire, and school.
Yeah. I recommend to vote for those three.
so you're gonna make a motion
Make a motion, yep.
to vote for those three?
Yep, school, fire, and police.
Okay, I have a motion by Mr. Robidoux. Is there
I'll second.
a second? I have a second by Kate. Any further discussion? Yeah.
Just would, I'd like to ask Kim Kleiner, do you see a problem? Because you've worked with this before, if we split it up to do a few now and the rest later, 3 and 3? You haven't seen an issue in past towns you've worked at? Okay, good, that's all I wanted to clarify.
I mean, even in the fall, the police, I would expect, would come back with with updated engineering drawings that will update their costs again. So it's not that we're doing it piecemeal, we're updating each item as we have the information, and that doesn't mean we're finished with each of those
Well,
items.
we'll talk it.
We're still building on the 2015 stuff, so.
Yep.
Okay. Well,
I
yeah,
do have one more question. You said the old one was focused more on paying off the high school. This one, how is this money gonna be? It's gonna be collected.
For the schools, this would be for a new elementary school.
elementary.
So that, because that's on the SIP only?
Yes.
Perfect,
That's,
okay,
yeah.
yep. Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah. Anything else? All right, we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed? Abstained? Motion passes. 1, 2, 3, 6. I'm sorry, 5-0-0. Thank you. Okay, so that'll be recommended to the Board of Selectmen so, on those 3 items. All right, well, thank you very much, everybody, for that. And thank you, Jay, for your presentation. Thank you, Ms. Kleiner, for clarification. Okay, moving on. Item number 2 on the agenda is work session on possible zoning changes. Jay, what are you thinking on that one?
So I'm not entirely sure. So
I know we were kind of like, what do we
I
do
would
about that?
say, one thing I think we did have a consensus around, and I didn't revisit it today, is we had spent a couple of sessions talking about the home occupation
Right.
ordinance and updating that, and I think there was just a general consensus that it made sense to move forward with that, with the biggest change being we dropped the references to firearms.
Right.
Beyond that just seemed that there was a consensus around that, so I imagine when the time is right, in the fall, we can move that forward. The other issue that we spent a fair amount of time discussing, and we do have some materials, and I can bring that up if we would like, was around the northern commercial zone in particular, and the concept that we have talked about for a couple of years of, do we want to allow some sort of mixed-use development, allow an additional option for housing in that area. That also led to some conversation around maybe some of the other commercial zones as well. Do we want to take a look at those? And we can certainly do that. And again, we've had some language examples. We've had some examples of what different concepts of development might look like. At the same time, though, there's also been discussion around, and the selectmen, I believe, would like, fair to say, move forward with creating a separate committee
Correct.
that would be taking a look at these issues a little more broadly, bringing in public input, and, because of the consequence of them to the town and to the tax base. And so I guess that leaves me not sure whether it makes sense for the planning board to continue talking about these changes kind of outside of the context
Right.
of that group, if that group's going to be moving forward. So that's I think, I guess, the question for the day. There's certainly other things we could be entertaining, but just kind of given that's, obviously these are pretty significant changes that we're talking about.
Right. Anybody have anything they want to add to that conversation? So certainly, I mean, we know that there's, obviously, there's going to be some sort of economic development committee. And sort of, we're kind of looking at it as, this committee is being formed to look at these issues. Do we want to sort of, hold on that, Kim?
I'm sorry. I met somebody from Amherst at NRPC. In their town, and I think Bamboozle Lake or something came up, accessory dwelling units came up in an interesting way, that somebody was trying to build another house on the lot and say their existing house would be the ADU. And I thought about that. Yeah, they're looking at it legally, so it seems to be getting very creative on the ADUs.
That's creative.
Yeah. And I said, well, we had spoken about maybe putting in an attached garage, maybe if the buildings didn't have to be attached anymore, right, but it could be upstairs, whatever. So, yeah, that should be interesting. I didn't know if they were trying to tighten it up over there.
If it's Babusick Lake, it's probably one of those seasonal home conversions, those small, yeah.
But to say you can build a brand-new house on the same lot and have your smaller house become the ADU, I thought was a little bit of a stretch, but I don't know.
Think that through.
Yeah, I would too, yeah. So that came up, I just figured, our ADUs look pretty good, I think, but, yeah.
We have a max size for the
Yeah,
ADUs,
we
I
do.
believe, right?
But it's
So-
inside the existing home, it's not gonna be.
No, but I think it's still only something like 800 square feet above.
Is it an upper limit? I thought it was in the
Yeah.
home, like a percentage of the home, but yeah.
No,
It
it's
had to be a
square
minimum,
foot.
right?
Yeah, there's a square foot limit. I don't know about Amherst, but there's a square foot
Yeah.
limit here.
But I just thought it was interesting, I'm trying to flip
is
the logic
interesting.
on that.
I mean, I think, in terms of like the northern commercial zone, I think maybe hold off on that discussion until the economic development committee that's being formed, because I think that's going to be part of their discussions.
Right.
Yeah, we need to wait for that.
The home occupation piece can probably, we can probably look at that, and, I don't think that's, no, that's good.
Right.
That would be a, place to look at.
And if I recall correctly, I do think the board still needs to designate someone to be a representative
Correct.
on the committee.
I was gonna bring that up, under other business, this evening, so, I think that, we can do that. Okay. Item 3 is a conceptual consultation for a subdivision proposal, tax map 18 lots 62 and 64, with access off of Pearson Street. Is there an applicant here this evening? Okay, why don't you come forward and introduce yourself to the board? And just to clarify to the board, this is a conceptual design it's not an official site plan. Nothing is binding on the board in terms of what is being presented. So this is really an open conversation that is being proposed, that something was being proposed, and that the board can ask questions. So good evening, and maybe you can introduce yourself.
Thank you. Good evening. My name is Doug McGuire, and I'm with the Dubé Group, and I'm here representing the developer on the property, Reggie Moreau, who's in the back of the room here. I have a couple handouts, if that would be all right for me to hand these out? Okay.
Thank you.
And so, Mr. Chair, you kind of nailed the point as you were opening the hearing here. We're really just looking for some initial feedback, conceptual feedback on this property. Possibly, we have met with the Conservation Commission, again, just kind of presenting our initial thoughts. Our goal here is to ultimately end up at a cluster subdivision, which I'll kind of walk you through quickly, which obviously has a yield plan that you start from, and so we just wanted to make sure that we were on the right track with that, and if there was any interest in this board participating in maybe a site walk with the Conservation Commission, that could be potentially set up as we're getting ready and getting more into the heavier engineering. We do have this is based on a fair amount of reality, even though this is a conceptual. It's a full survey prepared by our office. The wetlands have been fully delineated, so those are real, not approximated or anything like that. So this property is located with its primary frontage on Charles Bancroft Highway. It's 2 existing lots with a right-of-way access coming off of Pearson Street, which is directly across from Morrill, right? Is that, or what's the street right across the? Morrill Street, which forming a 4-way intersection with this. And so our thought was to come in off of that right of way and come up with some type of development. Total area that we're looking at, you can see we have a yield plan that we prepared on the 4th sheet titled yield plan, and that was intended to see what we could get, because as you know, the cluster regulations require us to start with that yield plan. So we went through that process in creating a layout that would meet your standard zoning, which was your 1 acre total lot size, your area of contiguous dry area, along with a minimum building envelope of 0.4 acres. And then, of course, you have that shape factor, which just kind of makes sure that you kind of have somewhat standardized lots shape-wise. And so we put together the yield plan as shown and ended up with 24 lots. Obviously, this is, I don't think, the best use of the property, and I think that's why your regulations push you in larger size projects such as this towards a cluster. We felt that the cluster does work better. But essentially what we've done is we've put together that yield plan, and then you can see that our open space plan is behind that with utilizing those 24 lots. We were actually able to preserve the hatched area that you see on the plan is the anticipated open space, and that is roughly 60% of the property. So a fair amount of the open space. We tried to keep the lot development in obviously the higher areas of uplands, and you have a much larger wetland system towards the rear of the property, which is going to be entirely in the open space, but also buffered by a fair amount of upland area, as you can see. We threw in the lower side of that area just in open space as well. I mean, I suppose it could have been split between a couple lots, but we figured, why not have that just be in a deed restricted area so that there's no questions of tree cutting or anything. You know where your property lines are. So the last graphic I have in here is just a little bit of a zoomed in view for you on the open space development, brought in just at a little bit more of a zoomed in scale. We have 2 wetland crossings that we would be proposing. Not large impacts, not fully designed at this point, but we do have some initial grading in here, and we're looking at about 3,500 square feet of impact and then a 500 square foot impact. So under 5,000 square feet of impact, we're fairly comfortable that we'll be under. So pretty minimal, trying to cross at the at the skinnier parts of those wetland features that go through the site there to access that upland in the rear. We did a full gamut of test pits out there, which you can see highlighted in those orange circles. Got really good soils out there. I don't have a ton of experience personally working in Litchfield, but I know Mr. Moreau does, and I guess he tells me that that's fairly common. But I was pretty impressed with the soils that were out there. I mean, all very nice soils, no ledge issues. So all good, usable lots, and I think those test pits prove out the viability of those lots. Fairly flat grades. We've looked at the road actually comes in very nicely. You can bring it down at basically 1% all the way to about 2,000 feet into the site, right where the cul-de-sac kind of turns up there. And that would end up being ultimately the low point. And our thought was that we could have that be a low point of basins with obviously some additional basins on the roadway coming in, all draining to that, and then going out towards the back behind lots 12 and 13 to like an infiltration pond area. I did some test pits out in that area as well, really good soils, so good for infiltration. We thought that would be a good use. Obviously best to infiltrate where you can and get that recharge, but that's our thought as far as how the drainage could potentially work. And I guess that's about it, but I mean, we thought you just wanted to at least understand it's not binding conversation, but just getting initial feedback, see if there was any interest for a site walk. And then obviously we would be working through the month of July to kind of finalize engineering and then come forward with a more formal application to see you guys, potentially in August.
Okay. You said the Conservation Commission was interested in a site walk as well?
They were. We actually scheduled one, and we ended up getting rained out at the last minute, unfortunately. So, but there was interest, and then I figured before rescheduling with them, we knew we wanted to come meet conceptually with this board as well. So I thought, get your guys' thoughts and whether there would be interest in a joint site walk, and if not, I can, we can do two or whatever. I just figured I'd make that offer.
Anybody have any questions or?
I think a site walk is a good idea.
Okay.
The last one we did jointly, I thought was really good too. It was
Yeah.
good to have the Conservation Commission there. That was just my sense.
And we did prepare for it, so I mean, it'll be a productive site walk. We have the center line marked out. We have the wetland crossing areas marked out, so we can kind of go right to those areas to understand, because obviously there's some special exceptions that we'd be needing to get. And that's one of the other reasons we wanted to at least get some initial feedback, because we have a zoning board application that we would have to do for the special exception of those wetland crossings. And so obviously, if we had some consensus from the Conservation Commission and the Planning Board, I think the zoning board would appreciate that feedback for when we're going for those crossings.
I think the zoning board meets the first week in July, I think is my understanding. Maybe we can reach out to them and see, because obviously I'm a member of the Conservation Commission, so maybe ask them and see what their availability for dates are. And we could schedule something with them, or do you want to do a separate sidewalk? I mean, it's up to you guys. I mean, certainly.
If we can combine it.
We can combine it. It might be just beneficial for everybody. So.
Got different hats, all at the
Right.
same spot, they
Right.
can kind of weigh in, so.
Perhaps, maybe at the next Conservation Commission meeting, we can address this and see if, what everybody's schedule is, and then come back to the board.
Sure.
And then we can figure out what everybody's schedule here is, and then work on, having a common date for doing that. So, but we appreciate that. Thank you.
Sure. Conservation Commission, I think, had said, because we're getting into that nicer weather, we can get away with doing something during the week, so it gives everybody a little bit more flexibility. You're not, because obviously weekends get more busy in the summertime, but if we could do something, at a 5 or 6 o'clock even, because you still got good light out there.
Yeah.
So that was the thought.
Okay.
Sounds good.
Sounds good. Anything else for this? I don't know, are there any abutters here this evening? No? Okay, just curious. All right. I mean, I could open it up to public input. Is there any members of the public that have any input this evening on this conceptual? And seeing none, I'll close public input. Okay, very good. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And we will work on, getting that sidewalk. So, thank you. Okay. Next item is an interview with planning board applicant Jared O'Connell. Is Jared here this evening?
Yep.
All right. Can you introduce yourselves to the board?
Hello, I'm Jared O'Connell at 6 Nesmith Court. Been a resident in Litchfield since just soon after I was born in 2000. And I'm interested in joining the planning board as a member.
Okay, great. Can you tell me a little bit about, your background and what do you do? Do you have, what do you do for work, or do you, what do you do as a resident of town, or?
As for work, I am a software engineer.
Okay.
I don't do a lot in town.
Okay.
I'm a resident and I use the streets for short. Like I run frequently, so I'm aware of a lot of the streets in the town. I've ran by a lot of them,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm pretty aware of the concepts that have been discussed in these meetings. I've been watching the meetings for about a year now,
Okay.
and I took the time to read the recommendation, read a good portion of the handbook given by the state for planning board members, and I skimmed the ordinances and stuff like that. So I think I am more qualified than the average person to participate.
Okay, great. Well, we're certainly welcoming to new members to the planning board. We meet the first and third Tuesday of the month at 7 p.m. here in Town Hall. Does anybody have any questions for Jared? Any other things that they want to ask? Why the planning board? I guess just curious.
I find the developments and infrastructure very interesting.
Okay.
Like I use like roads and sidewalks, and the developments have a lot of, they're important to the community, and other things like setting future, contributing to future plans are very interesting, because I definitely like seeing how things interact with each other.
Okay.
And yeah, I think my input could be valuable, and hopefully I can help contribute to maintaining the town's character. Yep, and yeah,
Okay.
hopefully represent the average resident well. I'll create a new perspective
Mhm.
as a person who grew up here.
Okay, wonderful. So the process here, just so you know, we would vote. Obviously, you filled out your application, you submitted it. We would vote as the planning board to recommend you to go before the Board of Selectmen. Board of Selectmen would be the body that would approve your appointment to the planning board. And so you would go before them, just like you came to us tonight. It would be the same kind of, you have the same kind of conversation. You'll have a chair and everything, and they'll be asking questions. The Board of Selectmen will ask questions. And then they will vote to approve your appointment. This board will recommend, and they will vote to approve. So, I don't know if there's any other questions from the board. Anybody have anything else that they want to ask Jared?
I just have a comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
I like
your application here, when, reason for applying, because it's perfect. The last part saying balancing the goals of the various interests. That's important.
Yeah, there's the residents, there's the goals of the state, which can be at odds because the residents here don't want any new developments off, really, because they want their woods. Like the development there definitely has negative opinions of those that are abutters because they're going to have something in their backyard, and a lot of people there use the trails because even though it's private land, there are trails there that people use. But at the same time, a development like that will provide more housing, which is a goal of the state, and will also provide income in the source of property taxes. Like that's like probably the development like that is like probably $200,000 a year in property taxes that will help the town and state. I calculated maybe we'll save a few percentage off everyone's taxes. So a lot of factors to consider.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay, so we have an application. We have an applicant who is interested in being a member of the planning board. What is the will of the board? Do you want to take a vote to recommend to the Board of Selectmen? What is it that you want to do?
I'll make a motion to recommend Jared O'Connell to the Board of Selectmen as a planning board member.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second the motion.
Second the motion. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the recommendation, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Okay, great. So you'll probably get, I don't know if Kim, I don't know if you want to maybe schedule Jared for something before the Board of Selectmen for their agenda at some point. If he's available, absolutely. Are you available, I guess, is the question.
I think I can make that.
Okay,
Okay.
great.
Thank you.
Well, good luck. Okay, and thank you for joining.
Look forward to learning a lot about the inner workings.
Absolutely. Okay, we appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right. The next item of business is committee reports. Kim, do you want to start us off with the committee reports?
Sure. And unfortunately, Kim just left, the other Kim. Board of Selectmen meets Monday, June 26th, 6:30 PM here at the Town Hall. Capital Improvement Planning Commission meets July 3rd. Okay, I have two members here.
Well, yeah,
And
I
July
know
4th, I think, is off.
There was discussion about that. I understand.
Yeah, but the minutes didn't say that we canceled.
There was no vote.
Yeah.
So,
So I don't, well, we're still on the calendar for July 3rd.
okay.
NRPC's quarterly commissioner meeting is tomorrow night, June 21st, 7 PM, 30 Temple Street in Nashua. Look forward to that. And of course, we have the 4th of July parade, 10 o'clock AM on the 4th of July, starting, I believe, at the northern part of Albuquerque. So that'll be nice. And that's all I have right now. Oh, wait a minute. Energy Commission, sorry. We do need public, 4 members of the public to join that commission. Yes, Vinu rings clear, doesn't he? Vinu Rao, right, from Bedford? No, he was from Hollis. He was everything about energy and green energy at NRPC. And I've listened to him for years, so I think it's time we need something here. Not saying all green energy, but we need to look at that. It's funny we're forming the commission when now the electric rates may go down about 20 to 40%, but that's okay. We still need to have a look. So we're still looking for 4 members from the public, and I believe they can, for the Energy Commission, go to the town website and have an application there. So please, apply if you're interested in that. And you're going to bring up the economic development one. So
Yep.
that's all I have.
Okay. Conservation Commission will meet the first Thursday in July. I have heard nothing about the Lower Merrimack Local River Advisory Committee having a meeting. Sure we'll keep our ears out for that. And the next CIP, as you discussed, is June, or technically right now, June 3rd. It looks like that hasn't changed. So we have a meeting then.
Do we have a meeting?
No one made them.
Right.
Right, so.
I'll be dialing in.
So, and I will be attending tomorrow night's commission meeting, NRPC, so I will be there for that. And that's all I have. Kate, do you have anything?
Budget committee meets Thursday.
Budget committee, okay. I'll get to the Economic Development Committee under any other business, but before I do that, approval of the June 6, 2023 minutes. Did everybody have an opportunity to look at those, have any questions or concerns? I know you had some changes, Kim?
Just one on the paragraph that I had emailed everybody. I also sent it to the person who does our minutes. I don't want to name him if he doesn't want to be named. Do you want me to read it out loud? Or are we the only ones seeing the internal meeting? We only see it ourselves, right? So right here, I sent an email to everybody what the original draft minutes look like, and I put in green what I added or struck out. So I said that myself stated that the applicant had already gone through the first phase of DOT process. And Mr. Hollis confirmed that and then stated that they were in the second phase. I stated that they met with the town administrator yesterday to discuss possible outcomes of whether the board waived the DOT conditional requirement or not. And most of this was already here, right? I'm just reading the whole paragraph. Then I said it may be an option for Mr. Hollis to write a letter that read there was no liability to the town, however, that it would be up to the vote of all the members of the board. She said earlier, meaning me, pointed out that the state is understaffed by 20% and behind in its approval process. And then the final statement should say, sentence should say, that I noted that the letter would also have to be approved by town council. So, he had it a little flipped around. So. That's my only change. I just updated that paragraph a bit. You see what I changed in green. Yeah, what I crossed out.
Okay. Anything else?
No, that was it.
If not,
Myself.
I'll entertain a motion to approve those minutes.
So me.
I have a motion by Kate. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Jeremy. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the approval of the June 6, 2023 minutes, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Abstained? Aye. Motion passes 4-0-1. Okay. Any other business? So, the Economic Development Committee is asking for board representatives. Is anybody interested here from the planning board who would like to be on as a representative on that committee? Certainly, I think it's important, and certainly want to give everybody the opportunity who has an interest in doing that.
Is it just one? Is it one per board?
It says the name of your board's representative, so I don't know. Kim, do you know, is it more than one or just one, or?
I believe that they asked for a member from each board, and then they asked Mr. Mankara separate.
Okay, all right, so we were looking for, one, I guess, a member. Does anybody have any interest in being on this committee?
Do we have any idea of the commitment required for the committee at all, as far as day of week, time, meeting numbers, that kind of stuff at all?
Well, I think what they're looking for is who our representative is going to be, and then I assume there'll be something that'll be scheduled.
Yeah, we have, because everybody's on a different board and we all meet at different nights.
Yeah.
So getting a room is gonna, so we have to
Right.
see
So
everybody's
I think
schedule first.
they need to know who the representative is gonna be for each committee or board or department.
So it was 2 Board of Selectmen members, and it was Steve, who was gonna be on it? Myself, and who was it? Steve Weber is on the, Energy Commission.
Okay.
I think, I have to look up, it was a while since we did it, so I'll be there, so I'll just let you know that. Sounds like Jay will be there. Yeah.
I believe that was the thought, is that
Let me see who that
the
was.
Selectman Queenan will be representing the board. So to have another member of the planning, if you get into a third, you've got a quorum of the
That's right.
board.
I see.
Planning board. I think in answer to your question, if I can give it a little bit, at first, there'll be some meetings to actually figure out what the plan is going to be, kind of develop like a strategic plan on how we want to. Then once there's actually public input, it could be more than a month commitment. It could be significantly more at that point. If you're looking for the number of hours, if I'm reading your
Yeah.
question correctly.
I just don't want to volunteer and then not be able to go a couple nights and be the only problem.
Would it be possible maybe if, if someone stepped up to be a representative of the planning board, but maybe have like a backup
Backup.
person, or, someone
Yeah.
who, if that person can't for some reason attend, then the other person would step into that position. That way you're covered even if you can't make the meeting.
Yeah, that I could definitely do if we can do that. Yeah.
Okay,
I think they were looking for new faces too.
yeah.
from what I heard.
So, would you be interested,
This is a
Jeremy?
great face, so let's do it.
You want to be, okay. All right, so, Jeremy has an interest. Anybody interested in being the backup for Jeremy? I mean, I'm happy to be that person if no one else wants to.
If you have the time, yeah, I'm strapped for time commitments at this point. So.
All right, so, we'll make Jeremy our representative. If for some reason Jeremy can't make a meeting, particularly, just, I can be the backup for that committee, if that works with everybody, if everyone's comfortable with that. Okay?
Sounds good.
All right, so I guess we're gonna take a vote then. Anybody want to entertain the motion?
I'll make a motion to recommend Jeremy Robitaille as the
Representative?
representative to the economic development chapter from the planning board with Chair Croto as a backup.
Okay, I have a motion. Do I have a second? Second by Sam. Is there any discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, abstained. Motion passes 5-0-0. All right, well, congratulations.
We bring real estate experience to it.
Yeah.
We need
I don't mind doing it. It's kind of, I
facets,
just want to be able to go to it if I need the commitment, so
Yeah.
my only worry.
Understood. Okay, great. Well, thank you very much. Any other business? Jay, do you have anything?
I do not.
Kim, do you have anything?
I do not.
But Kim Kleiner does. Yes, please.
Kim Kleiner. I was made aware of something just before your meeting. And I don't know, Chair Cordo, if the Merrimack Lower Advisory was made aware or not. Horse. The town was not. To my knowledge, we did not receive a notice. But Thursday
Yeah.
at 6 o'clock in Merrimack is a public hearing on the St. Gobain.
Oh, yes. I did see that going through
Yeah.
the town of Merrimack, yeah.
So, they did submit a draft state permit, which we knew was coming. That was kind of the last notice that the town had heard. I haven't seen the draft state permit for operations, but it's at the Merrimack High School Little Theater. Merrimack is broadcasting it. They reached out. There's a number of other towns that are also jumping in to broadcast it, and one of them will be our LCTV.
Good.
So they will stream it as well.
All right.
So I plan on, like I said, I was just informed of this right at the beginning, prior to your meeting. I'm gonna let the Board of Selectmen know, in an email when I get back, but, that might be something that people are interested in tuning up into.
Do you know if they're accepting, public input from regional abutters?
It does not say that they are accepting input from everyone until June 28th, so it's kind of like an open
Yeah.
input
Right.
to DES.
Submit written copies.
You can submit it to DES. It doesn't specifically say about public hearing feedback that night. It does say that some of it at least is virtual, so I'm not sure what type of setup they will have.
I do believe we had quite a few people write in, and I think it was DES, the last time. They were looking for an extension of, I think, the mitigations that they were supposed to put in. So I know we had quite a few people write in on that. So is that something that they can submit online to DES?
So there is, in the public notice that they issued, there is a contact that they can, submit written response to. I haven't seen, there was some testing done back at the beginning of May. And there was some runoff that was still testing. It was testing substantially better, but still testing with some contaminants. We knew that this application was coming, and that's really as much as we knew. Like I said, I don't know if other towns abutters were notified of this hearing or not. But I'm very thankful that our LCTV staff was on the ball and
That's great.
they found out.
Okay, thank you. We'll have to look more.
Can we forward that to our two state reps, because they were working with the water issue as well, just to let them know about that public notice?
Yes,
Okay,
absolutely.
thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, thank you, Kim.
You're
Yeah.
welcome.
Okay. Thank you.
And the last thing I have, so I asked Joan to send to you copy of the budget for the planning board. So the Board of Selectmen is going to be having its first hearing, I believe, on August, in August sometime. 28th, I believe, is yeah, thank you, 28th of August. But I guess Administrator Kleiner would like to get some information by July 31st. So what I'd like to do is have you guys, at your leisure, take a look at the budget for the planning board. If you have any questions or anything that comes up, maybe at the next meeting, we can talk about it. But I just want to put that on the radar, that budget season is approaching, and we are up first. So just wanted to put that out there. So I asked Joan to send a copy of the budget to you folks, just for your review. Okay. I have nothing else this evening, and if anybody else doesn't have anything else, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'll make
I have a motion by Sam. Do I have a second?
second.
Second by Kim. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed, abstained, motion passes 5-0-0. Thank you for joining us this evening. Our next meeting will be in July. So hopefully, when in July?
Middle of July.
End of July?
Middle.
Middle of July.
18th.
18th. So happy 4th to everybody, and happy summer, openings of summer. So thank you. Have a good evening. Good night.